Sure, here's the text you provided. 1. Where does the most rain fall in the Himalayas? The Himalayas are very tall mountains. At the bottom of these mountains, near the land, there are hills. This part is called the Himalayan foothills. The rain is heaviest when you are at around 1,500 meters high. That's not too high up the mountain, just like being on a tall hill. When you go higher than 1,500 meters, the rain starts to become less. Example: imagine climbing a hill. At the halfway point, it's raining the most. But if you keep going higher, the rain slowly becomes less until there's barely any. 2. How rain changes from east to west. In India, the amount of rain decreases as you move from east to west. In the east, places like Calcutta get a lot of rain, about 115 centimeters during the monsoon season. But in the west, places like Multan get very little rain, only 12.5 centimeters during the monsoon. Example: imagine you are holding a bucket of water and walking. When you start walking from the east, Calcutta, the bucket is full and you pour out lots of water, rain. As you keep walking towards the west, Multan, there's less water in the bucket, so less rain falls. 3. What happens in the northwest? In the northwest part of India, like in places near Punjab and Rajasthan, the amount of rain is not only very small, but it also changes a lot. This means that some years they get more rain, but some years they get almost no rain. The rain in this area is unpredictable. You don't know exactly when it will come. Example: imagine you have a tap in your house that sometimes gives you a lot of water, but sometimes it gives you only a little, or even nothing at all. That's what rain is like in the northwest. It's unreliable. 4. What controls the rainfall? The monsoon winds bring rain to India. These winds come from the Indian Ocean and move across the country. The strength of these monsoon winds, especially the Ganges Valley current, winds that move through the Ganges River area, decides whether there will be a lot of rain or very little rain. Strong monsoon winds equals more rain. Weak monsoon winds equals less rain or no rain. Example: think of the monsoon winds like a fan. If the fan is strong, it blows hard and cools the room, bringing lots of rain. If the fan is weak, it barely moves the air, bringing very little rain. 5. How do wind changes affect the rain? Sometimes the weather can change suddenly and the wind direction can shift. In areas like Punjab, the wind might switch from monsoon winds, which bring rain, to northwest winds, which are dry and bring no rain. When this happens, it causes droughts, periods with very little or no rain, making it hard for crops to grow and people to get water. Example: imagine you are standing in front of a fan blowing cool air on you, rain. Suddenly, the fan turns the other way, and now it's blowing hot, dry air. The coolness, rain, is gone, and it feels dry and uncomfortable. What happens with anticyclones? Sometimes, a special weather condition called an anticyclone happens in Punjab. An anticyclone is when the air moves in a circle, but instead of bringing rain, it brings dry air. This makes the northwest winds blow instead of the monsoon winds. These northwest winds are dry and hot, and they make places like Uttar Pradesh and nearby areas even drier. When these dry winds blow for a long time, it can cause droughts, which means people and farmers don't get enough rain for their crops. Example: imagine an anticyclone is like a giant hairdryer in the sky. Instead of blowing cool, moist air, rain, it blows hot, dry air. This dries out the land, and without enough water, plants and animals struggle. 7. What is a drought? A drought happens when a place doesn't get enough rain for a long time. Without enough rain, the land becomes very dry. Crops, like rice, wheat, and other food plants, can't grow properly, and people may run out of water to drink or use for farming. Example: imagine you have a garden that you water every day, but then, for weeks, you can't give it any water. The plants start to wither, dry up, and die because they aren't getting the water they need to grow. That's what happens during a drought. Extra info to simplify. Foothills. The lower part of a mountain, near the bottom. It's like a small hill leading up to the bigger mountains. Precipitation. A word that means rain, snow, or any water that falls from the sky. Variable rainfall. When the amount of rain changes a lot from time to time. One year there may be a lot of rain, and another year there may be very little. Low pressure system. A type of weather pattern that usually brings clouds and rain. Anticyclone, a weather condition that brings clear skies and dry air. It's the opposite of a low-pressure system. Let's summarize. In the Himalayan foothills, the most rain falls at about 1,500 meters up. But if you go higher, the rain starts to decrease. As you move from east to west across India, the amount of rain decreases. For example, Calcutta gets a lot of rain, but Multan gets very little. In the northwest of India, the rain is not only small, but it also changes a lot. Sometimes they get rain, and sometimes they don't. The Ganges Valley monsoon winds control how much rain comes. If the winds are strong, there's more rain. If the winds are weak, there's less rain. Sometimes the wind changes direction, bringing dry northwest winds instead of rainy monsoon winds. This can cause droughts. When an anticyclone forms, it brings dry air, which makes things even drier. This can make places like Uttar Pradesh very dry and cause more drought. Does this make everything easier to understand now? All right, let's break it down in the simplest way possible. What is the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal branch? Monsoon winds are like large fans that bring rain to India. There are two main winds, one from the Arabian Sea and one from the Bay of Bengal. Both of these winds have a destination. They head towards a low-pressure area in the northwestern part of India. Think of low pressure like a magnet for rain clouds. The clouds want to go to this place because there's space for them there. What happens in peninsular India? Peninsular India is the big piece of land in the middle and south of India. In this area, the winds mostly come from the southwest. Imagine you are standing on a beach in southern India. The wind is blowing from the ocean to the land, coming from the southwest. What happens in the northern plains? The northern plains are a flat area in the northern part of India, below the Himalayas. Here, the air moves in a different direction. It travels from the southeast towards the northwest. Imagine you are standing on the plains, and the wind is coming from the right, southeast, and moving to the left, northwest. Monsoon depressions and cyclonic storms. Sometimes, cyclonic storms form over the Bay of Bengal. These are like big spinning clouds that bring heavy rain. These storms move from the east to the west along the foot of the peninsular hills. They give a lot of rain to the southern sides of the plains. What if there were no cyclonic storms? Without these cyclonic storms, the southern side of the plains wouldn't get much rain. The rains are very important for growing rice, a key crop in these areas. Example, think of the cyclonic storms as giant watering cans that water the rice fields. Without them, the fields would be dry and the rice wouldn't grow. Simple example. Imagine you have two giant fans. One fan is blowing from the Arabian Sea and the other fan is blowing from the Bay of Bengal. Both of these fans are pointing towards a low-pressure area in the northwest of India, like a big space. Along the way, the fans push clouds and rain across the land. In the northern plains, there's a special path where cyclones bring lots of rain to the southern part. If those cyclones don't come, that part of the plains would be dry, and rice plants wouldn't get enough water. Key points to remember. 1. Monsoon winds from both the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal go to the northwest. 2. In peninsular India, winds come mostly from the southwest. 3. In the northern plains, winds move from the southeast to the northwest. 4. Cyclonic storms bring heavy rain to the southern side of the plains, which is very important for rice farming. 5. Without these storms, the southern plains would be much drier. This helps. Does this make everything clear for you? Let's break down the winter monsoon step by step, using simple words and examples to make it as clear as possible. 1. What happens in winter? In winter, it gets very cold over the land, especially in Asia. When the land is cold, the air above it also cools down. This causes a high-pressure area to form. High pressure means the air is pushing down on the ground harder than normal because the cold air is heavy and sinks down. Think of it like a heavy blanket pushing down on you. In this case, the air is that heavy blanket. 2. Where is the high pressure? The main high-pressure area is located in Mongolia, which is in the middle of Asia. In winter, Mongolia becomes like a giant freezer. The cold air from this area starts blowing out in all directions, like a cold wind. These cold winds are called cold waves because they feel like a wave of cold air moving across the land. 3. Why doesn't the cold air reach India? Even though the cold air is blowing from Mongolia, it doesn't reach India because of the Himalayas. The Himalayas are tall mountains that act like a huge wall. This wall blocks the cold air from coming into India, keeping most of the cold weather out. Example: imagine standing behind a tall fence on a windy day. The fence blocks the wind, so you don't feel the cold air. The Himalayas do the same for India by stopping the cold winds. 4. High pressure in India, Kashmir and Punjab. While most of the high pressure is in Mongolia, there's also a smaller high pressure area in Kashmir and Punjab, which are in the northern part of India. This smaller high pressure still controls how the wind moves in India. Think of it like a smaller version of the big freezer in Mongolia, but it still has an effect on the weather. 5. Low pressure over the oceans. While the land Asia has high pressure, the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and areas near Australia have low pressure. Low pressure means there is less air pushing down, like a half-filled balloon where the air isn't packed tightly. Air always moves from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. So, in winter, the air moves from the cold land, high pressure, toward the sea, low pressure. This movement of air is what we call the winter monsoon, or the northeast monsoon. Example: imagine squeezing a full balloon, high pressure. The air rushes out to an empty balloon, low pressure. This is like the wind rushing from land to sea. 6. Wind direction in India. Depending on where you are in India, the wind blows from different directions in winter. In the Gangetic Plain, the large flat area where the Ganges River flows, the cold wind blows from the northwest. In peninsular India, the southern part of India, the wind blows from the northeast or east. In Sindh and Gujarat in the west of India, the wind blows from the northeast. These winds are usually light and not too strong. 7. Anticyclonic winds. In winter, the wind pattern is called anticyclonic. This means the winds are controlled by a high pressure system and blow outward in a spiral. These anticyclonic winds are dry and cold because they come from the land. Example: imagine a fan that blows air outward, but instead of warm air, it's blowing cold air. This is what the anticyclonic winds do. They spread cold air out from the high pressure center. 8. Why don't these winds bring rain? The winter winds come from the land, and because they travel over land, they don't pick up moisture, water. Since they don't carry moisture, these winds are dry and don't bring rain. Example: think of a sponge that's completely dry. If you squeeze it, nothing comes out because there's no water inside. These winter winds are like that dry sponge. No moisture means no rain. In India, this means the winter weather is mostly dry and fine with no significant rain. Summary of the winter monsoon. 1. Cold winter creates high pressure over Asia, especially in Mongolia. 2. Cold air blows out from Mongolia, but the Himalayas block the cold air from reaching India. 3. A smaller high pressure forms over Kashmir and Punjab, controlling the wind direction in India. 4. Low pressure forms over the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea, so the winds blow from land to sea. 5. These winds are called the northeast monsoon. 6. The wind direction in India varies by region. Northwest in the Gangetic Plain, northeast in the south and west. 7. The winds are dry because they come from the land and they don't bring rain, making the weather dry and pleasant in winter. Extra tip: in summer, the opposite happens. The land becomes very hot and the sea is cooler. This causes the winds to reverse, and that's when the summer monsoon, rainy season, brings rain to India. I hope this detailed explanation makes it clearer. Let me know if you need more examples or further clarification. Let's break down the winter monsoon step by step, using simple words and examples to make it as clear as possible. 1. What happens in winter? In winter, it gets very cold over the land, especially in Asia. When the land is cold, the air above it also cools down. This causes a high-pressure area to form. High pressure means the air is pushing down on the ground harder than normal because the cold air is heavy and sinks down. Think of it like a heavy blanket pushing down on you. In this case, the air is that heavy blanket. 2. Where is the high pressure? The main high-pressure area is located in Mongolia, which is in the middle of Asia. In winter, Mongolia becomes like a giant freezer. The cold air from this area starts blowing out in all directions, like a cold wind. These cold winds are called cold waves because they feel like a wave of cold air moving across the land. 3. Why doesn't the cold air reach India? Even though the cold air is blowing from Mongolia, it doesn't reach India because of the Himalayas. The Himalayas are tall mountains that act like a huge wall. This wall blocks the cold air from coming into India, keeping most of the cold weather out. Example. Imagine standing behind a tall fence on a windy day. The fence blocks the wind, so you don't feel the cold air. The Himalayas do the same for India by stopping the cold winds. 4. High pressure in India, Kashmir and Punjab. While most of the high pressure is in Mongolia, there's also a smaller high pressure area in Kashmir and Punjab, which are in the northern part of India. This smaller high pressure still controls how the wind moves in India. Think of it like a smaller version of the big freezer in Mongolia, but it still has an effect on the weather. 5. Low pressure over the oceans. While the land Asia has high pressure, the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and areas near Australia have low pressure. Low pressure means there is less air pushing down, like a half-filled balloon where the air isn't packed tightly. Air always moves from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. So, in winter, the air moves from the cold land, high pressure, toward the sea, low pressure. This movement of air is what we call the winter monsoon, or the northeast monsoon. Example. Imagine squeezing a full balloon, high pressure. The air rushes out to an empty balloon, low pressure. This is like the wind rushing from land to sea. 6. Wind direction in India. Depending on where you are in India, the wind blows from different directions in winter. In the Gangetic Plain, the large flat area where the Ganges River flows, the cold wind blows from the northwest. In peninsular India, the southern part of India, the wind blows from the northeast or east. In Sindh and Gujarat in the west of India, the wind blows from the northeast. These winds are usually light and not too strong. 7. Anticyclonic winds. In winter, the wind pattern is called anticyclonic. This means the winds are controlled by a high pressure system and blow outward in a spiral. These anticyclonic winds are dry and cold because they come from the land. Example, imagine a fan that blows air outward, but instead of warm air, it's blowing cold air. This is what the anticyclonic winds do. They spread cold air out from the high pressure center. 8. Why don't these winds bring rain? The winter winds come from the land, and because they travel over land, they don't pick up moisture, water. Since they don't carry moisture, these winds are dry and don't bring rain. Example. Think of a sponge that's completely dry. If you squeeze it, nothing comes out because there's no water inside. These winter winds are like that dry sponge. No moisture means no rain. In India, this means the winter weather is mostly dry and fine with no significant rain. Summary of the winter monsoon. 1. Cold winter creates high pressure over Asia, especially in Mongolia. 2. Cold air blows out from Mongolia, but the Himalayas block the cold air from reaching India. 3. A smaller high pressure forms over Kashmir and Punjab, controlling the wind direction in India. 4. Low pressure forms over the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea, so the winds blow from land to sea. 5. These winds are called the northeast monsoon. 6. The wind direction in India varies by region. Northwest in the Gangetic Plain, northeast in the south and west. 7. The winds are dry because they come from the land, and they don't bring rain, making the weather dry and pleasant in winter. Extra tip. In summer, the opposite happens. The land becomes very hot, and the sea is cooler. This causes the winds to reverse, and that's when the summer monsoon, rainy season, brings rain to India. I hope this detailed explanation makes it clearer. Let me know if you need more examples or further clarification. Let's break down the concept of the retreating southwest monsoon step by step, using very simple words to explain how it works and why it happens. I'll guide you through it like you're learning it for the first time. 1. What is the southwest monsoon? The southwest monsoon is a season in India when it rains a lot, mostly during the months of June to September. These rains are brought by winds coming from the Indian Ocean. 2. What does retreating monsoon mean? Retreating means moving back or going away. So, the retreating southwest monsoon is when the rains slowly stop and the winds that brought the rain start to go back. This happens in late September and continues until early October. 3. Why does the monsoon retreat? During the rainy season, there is a low pressure area in the northwest part of India, which helps pull in the monsoon winds. But by September, this low pressure becomes weaker and disappears. Example: imagine a vacuum cleaner pulling air towards it. When you turn off the vacuum, it stops pulling. Similarly, when the low pressure weakens, the winds stop bringing rain. 4. Where does the low pressure move? After the low pressure disappears from the northwest, it shifts down to the equator, the middle part of the earth. Example: think of it like a balloon that moves from one side of a room to another. The low pressure zone moves toward the equator. 5. How does the monsoon retreat? The retreat of the monsoon is gradual, which means it happens slowly. It doesn't stop suddenly like flipping a switch. It takes time. Example: think of a movie ending with the credits rolling slowly. It takes time for the rain to completely stop. 6. How does the Indian Meteorological Department know when the monsoon is over? The Indian Meteorological Department, this is the team that studies weather in India, uses rainfall to figure out when the monsoon is starting or stopping. They check if the rain is increasing or decreasing over a few days to decide when the monsoon is starting or ending. 7. When does rain start to decrease? By the end of September, the amount of rain in northern India, like in places such as Punjab or Uttar Pradesh, starts to go down. By October, the rain in the northern plains mostly stops. 8. Rain continues in southern India. In the southern part of India, places like Tamil Nadu, the rain continues until December. Example: think of it like two different taps. The northern tap, North India, turns off in September, but the southern tap, South India, stays on until December. 9. What happens after the monsoon stops? After the rains stop in the northern plains, the weather changes. Instead of the rainy cyclonic winds, winds that bring rain, there are now anticyclonic winds, winds that don't bring rain and are cold and dry. Example: imagine the rainy clouds being pushed away and replaced by dry, cold air like a cool breeze after a hot day. 10. How does the retreat happen? The monsoon retreats from north to south, meaning it leaves northern India first and then moves away from southern India later. The rains that were brought by the southwest monsoon stop and cold, dry winds from the north begin to take over. Summary of the retreating southwest monsoon. 1. Retreating monsoon means the monsoon winds and rains start going away slowly, starting from the end of September. 2. The low pressure area in northwest India weakens and moves toward the equator, causing the monsoon to retreat. 3. Rain starts decreasing in North India by October, while in South India it continues until December. 4. The Indian Meteorological Department uses changes in rainfall to decide when the monsoon is starting or stopping. 5. After the monsoon retreats, cold and dry winds take over the northern plains, replacing the rainy season with winter. This is the basic explanation of the retreating southwest monsoon. If you have any questions or need further details, feel free to ask. Let's break down everything about the retreat of the southwest monsoon and the beginning of the northeast monsoon in a simple and easy to understand way. 1. When does the southwest monsoon start retreating? By September 15th, the monsoon starts to leave the Punjab, a northern state in India. The monsoon gradually retreats from different parts of India. It leaves Uttar Pradesh, another northern state, by around October 1. It leaves Bengal in eastern India by October 15. 2. Why is the retreat of monsoon important? If the monsoon retreats too early, it can be bad for crops. Crops that are still growing need rain. Without enough rain, the crops can dry out. Example: imagine you have a plant that needs water every day to grow. If you stop watering it too soon, the plant will wilt and not grow properly. 3. What happens in southern India during the retreat? While the monsoon is leaving the northern parts of India, it still gives rain to southern states like Karnataka around October and November. Chennai in Tamil Nadu gets a lot of rain during this time, about 55 centimeters in the months of October and November. Example: imagine two taps in your house. The northern tap, North India, is turned off by October, but the southern tap, South India, is still running and gives water rain until November. 4. Cyclonic depressions over the seas. During this time, depressions, which are low-pressure areas, form over the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. Some of these depressions can turn into hurricanes, which bring heavy rain and strong winds to the southern parts of India. Example: think of a depression like a big swirl of air. Sometimes, this swirl becomes very strong, like a hurricane, causing lots of rain and wind. 5. Rainfall in southern India. During the retreat, the retreating southwest monsoon is responsible for the winter rains in southern India. Places like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka get important rainfall during October and November because of these winds. 6. What about the northeast monsoon? After the southwest monsoon fully retreats, the northeast monsoon begins to set in. This happens from around October to December. Example: think of it like changing seasons. First, the rainy season ends slowly, southwest monsoon retreating, and then a new season starts, northeast monsoon. 7. How do the winds change? As the southwest monsoon retreats, the wind directions start to change. In North India, the winds start blowing from the west. In South India, the winds shift and start blowing from the northeast. 8. Gradual change. The change from the southwest monsoon to the northeast monsoon is slow and gradual. It doesn't happen all at once. During this time, the southwest monsoon is moving out and the northeast monsoon is moving in. Example: imagine you are slowly closing one door, southwest monsoon, and at the same time slowly opening another door, northeast monsoon. It's a gentle shift, not a quick one. Summary of the retreating southwest monsoon and northeast monsoon. 1. The retreat of the southwest monsoon starts around September 15th in the Punjab and continues until December. 2. Northern India stops receiving rain by October, but southern India continues to get rain until November. 3. Chennai and parts of Karnataka get a lot of rain during the retreat because of the monsoon winds and cyclonic depressions over the seas. 4. The northeast monsoon starts to come in slowly after the southwest monsoon retreats. 5. The wind directions change. In North India, winds start blowing from the west. In South India, winds start blowing from the northeast. 6. The shift between monsoons is slow and takes place between October and December. This explains how the retreating southwest monsoon and the northeast monsoon work in simple terms. Let me know if you want more details or examples. Let's dive deeper into the concept of the burst of monsoon in the simplest and most detailed way possible. What is the burst of monsoon? The burst of the monsoon is when the southwest monsoon winds suddenly bring heavy rains to India. This happens in June. It's called a burst because the rain comes quickly and heavily, almost like a storm. Example: imagine it's been hot and dry for many weeks. Then, all of a sudden, the sky turns dark. Strong winds blow, and it starts raining really hard. This is what happens during the burst of the monsoon. How does this burst happen? 1. Hot summer before the burst. In April and May, the sun heats up India. The heat makes the air over the land rise. This rising air creates a low-pressure area. Low pressure is like a vacuum that sucks in air from other places, like the ocean. Example. Think of a balloon. When you heat it, the air inside rises. Similarly, when India gets hot, the air rises, creating space for the cooler, moist air from the ocean to move in. 2. Winds from the ocean bring moisture. The southwest winds from the Indian Ocean are full of moisture, water in the air. These winds want to bring this moisture to India to cause rain. Example. Imagine a sponge full of water. When it reaches land, it squeezes out all the water as rain. The southwest monsoon winds are like that sponge. Number 3. What blocks the monsoon? In April and May, something called the subtropical jet stream blocks the rain from reaching India. The subtropical jet stream is a fast-moving wind high up in the sky over northern India. This jet stream acts like a wall that stops the rain from coming. Example. Imagine a strong fan blowing over northern India, pushing the rain clouds away, so they can't move forward. What happens in June? 4. The jet stream moves away. By late May or early June, the subtropical jet stream moves north, past the Himalayas. This removes the block that was stopping the rain. Once the jet stream is gone, the monsoon winds from the ocean can rush in and bring heavy rain. Example. Imagine a wall is suddenly moved away and water comes rushing in quickly. That's what happens with the monsoon winds. 5. Sudden change in weather. The weather changes quickly and dramatically. One day, it's hot and dry, and the next day, it's cloudy, windy, and raining heavily. Example. Think of turning on a water tap suddenly. Water gushes out quickly, just like how the rain arrives suddenly with the monsoon. Why does the burst happen? 6. Change in air circulation. In late May or June, changes happen in the way air moves high up in the sky. A special zone called the equatorial convergence zone moves north. This zone is where winds meet and push up moist air to form clouds. As this zone moves north, it brings more moist air to India, causing rain. Example. Imagine two winds meeting and pushing clouds up into the sky. These clouds then drop rain. This is what happens when the equatorial convergence zone moves over India. 7. Stages of the monsoon. The monsoon doesn't arrive in all parts of India at the same time. It comes in stages. First, it hits Kerala, southern India, then moves north to central and northern India. Example. Think of a wave that starts in the south and gradually moves northward, bringing rain to different regions at different times. After the burst of the monsoon. 8. What happens after the burst? Once the monsoon bursts, it rains for several months, usually from June to September or October. These rains are important for crops and provide water to cool down the land after the hot summer. Example. Farmers rely on this rain to grow crops like rice and wheat. Without the rain, the land would stay dry and crops wouldn't grow. Key points to remember. The burst of the monsoon happens in June when the southwest winds from the ocean bring heavy rain to India. Before the burst, a jet stream, fast-moving wind, acts like a wall, stopping the rain from coming. In late May or June, the jet stream moves away, allowing the monsoon winds to bring rain. The change from dry weather to rain is very sudden and strong. The monsoon doesn't come all at once. It arrives in stages, starting from the south and moving north. Additional information. The equatorial convergence zone is a region near the equator where winds meet. When this zone moves over India, it helps bring the monsoon rains. The subtropical jet stream is like a block that prevents rain. When it moves away, the rains can come in. By thinking of the monsoon as a sudden change from dry to rainy weather, with winds carrying moisture from the ocean and blocked by a jet stream that eventually moves away, you can understand how this dramatic weather event happens. Let's break this down even further and explain everything in the simplest way, step by step. Burst of monsoon. What does it mean? The burst of the monsoon is when the monsoon rains suddenly start in India. This happens in June, and it feels dramatic because it comes very quickly and brings a lot of rain. Why does it happen? To understand this, we need to know what happens in the air above us, especially over the Tibetan highland, a big and high mountain area in the north of India. Step-by-step explanation. 1. Warm air over Tibetan highland. In summer, the Tibetan highland gets very hot. This creates something called a warm core anticyclone. Let's break that term down. Warm core means the center is hotter than the surrounding air. Anticyclone means the air moves outward from the center. Example. Imagine a hot pot in the middle of a cold table. The heat spreads out from the pot to the surroundings. The Tibetan highland acts like the hot pot. 2. Easterly jet wind. Because of this hot air over the Tibetan highland, a special wind starts to blow from the east. This wind is called the easterly jet. This wind blows at around 15 degrees latitude, which is around southern India. Example. Imagine a strong wind blowing across the southern part of India, starting from the east and going west. 3. Spreading of the wind. This easterly jet doesn't just stay over India. It spreads all the way to eastern Africa. These upper air conditions help the southwest monsoon winds to start moving into India. Example. Think of opening a door for the monsoon winds to rush into India. The easterly jet opens this door. 4. Monsoon winds over India. After this, the southwest monsoon spreads over India, bringing rain. The monsoon current is deep, meaning the wind that brings rain goes high up in the sky. Over southern India, it goes up to 6.5 kilometers into the air. Over the northern plains, like the Gangetic Plain, it goes up to 5 kilometers. Example, think of the monsoon wind as a blanket of rain covering India, with different heights in the south and the north. Why is the monsoon burst important? 1. Stops the dry heat. Before the monsoon, northern India, like the Gangetic Plain, is very hot and has dry winds called Lu. When the monsoon comes, it brings cooler air and moisture, stopping the Lu and cooling things down. Example. Imagine standing in front of a hot oven, then suddenly the door opens, and a cool breeze rushes in to cool you down. 2. Makes the air humid. When the monsoon comes, the air becomes full of moisture or humidity. This is important for crops like rice that need a lot of water to grow. Example. The monsoon is like turning on a sprinkler in a dry garden to help plants grow. Weather changes after monsoon burst. 1. Cooler days, warmer nights. When the monsoon starts, the days become cooler because the maximum temperature, the highest temperature during the day, drops. However, the nights become a little warmer because the minimum temperature, the lowest temperature during the night, increases slightly. Example. If before the monsoon the day was 40 degrees Celsius, after the monsoon it might be 30 degrees Celsius during the day. But if the night was 20 degrees before, it might now be 22 degrees Celsius after the monsoon. 2. Sticky and uncomfortable weather. Even though the temperature drops, the high humidity makes the weather feel sticky and sultry. People start to sweat easily, even without doing much activity. Example, it's like being in a steam room. It's cooler, but still feels uncomfortable because of all the moisture in the air. More details about the monsoon process. 1. Monsoon's abrupt arrival. The arrival of the monsoon is sudden and dramatic. One day it's dry and hot, and the next day the sky bursts open with rain. The sudden change happens because of the quick shift in the wind patterns over India. 2. Connection to the whole planet's weather. The burst of the monsoon is part of a bigger process of readjustment in the world's weather patterns, especially over southern Asia. The easterly jet winds and the monsoon currents are part of the way the planet balances its heat and wind systems. Why the burst of monsoon is important for people. The monsoon burst brings rain, which is vital for crops. Without the monsoon, farmers wouldn't be able to grow crops like rice that depend on heavy rainfall. The monsoon also brings relief from the dry heat of summer, but the humidity can make the weather feel uncomfortable. Summary in the simplest terms. The burst of monsoon is when the monsoon rains suddenly start, usually in June. This happens because of changes in the air over the Tibetan highland, which creates special winds that help bring rain to India. The monsoon is important because it stops the dry heat, brings rain for crops, and cools down the days. However, it also makes the air very humid and sticky, which can feel uncomfortable for people. Let's dive deeper into the explanation and keep it as simple as possible. What is the Indian monsoon? The Indian monsoon is a big weather system that brings heavy rains to India, especially during the summer months, June to September. This rain is extremely important because it helps with farming, fills rivers, and provides drinking water. The old idea about how the monsoon starts. In the past, people thought that the Indian monsoon was caused by low pressure and high pressure on the Earth's surface. Low pressure happens when hot air rises, creating an empty space where cooler air rushes in. High pressure happens when cool air sinks down, and this pushes air out. This idea was simple. The difference in pressure between land and sea was enough to cause the monsoon winds. But now, scientists believe that just low and high pressure is not enough to explain how the monsoon starts. There is more to the story. The new idea. The role of the Tibet Plateau. In recent studies, scientists found out that the Tibet Plateau, a high mountain region in the north of India, plays a huge role in causing the Indian monsoon. Let's break this down. 1. What is the Tibet Plateau? It is a very large and high mountain area in Tibet, located just north of India. It is one of the highest places on Earth. 2. How does the Tibet Plateau affect the monsoon? During the summer, the sun heats up this high mountain region. When this area gets really hot, the air over the Tibet Plateau starts to rise. Rising air creates a low-pressure zone over the Tibet Plateau. Example. Think of the Tibet Plateau like a hot stove. When it gets hot, the air above it rises, just like hot air from a stove rises. 3. Air from the ocean rushes in. When the air over Tibet rises, it leaves an empty space. This empty space pulls in cooler air from the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea, just like how a vacuum cleaner pulls in air. This cooler air from the ocean is full of moisture, water. Example, imagine a vacuum cleaner. When you turn it on, it pulls in air from outside to fill the empty space. The hot Tibet Plateau works like this, pulling in moist air from the ocean. 4. Rain happens. As this moist air moves over India and hits mountains like the Himalayas, it cools down and the moisture turns into rain. This rain is what we call the monsoon. Example, think of it like when you blow on a cold glass. The moisture from your breath turns into tiny water droplets on the glass. That's what happens to the air when it reaches the mountains. It turns into rain. Important studies about the monsoon. Here are 2 key studies that helped scientists understand how the Tibet Plateau affects the monsoon. 1. Monsoon Expedition, MONEX, 1973. In 1973, India and the Soviet Union, now Russia, worked together to study the Indian monsoon. They used scientific ships to study the monsoon winds over the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea. They found that the heating of the Tibet Plateau is a key reason the monsoon starts over India. 2. 1958 Symposium on Monsoons. In 1958, scientists from around the world met to discuss how monsoons work. Dr. P. Koteswaram, an Indian scientist, said that the heating of the Tibet Plateau during summer is the most important factor for causing the monsoon. Scientists agreed that the Tibet Plateau is crucial for starting the monsoon. Why is this important? The Tibet Plateau is like a trigger for the monsoon. Without it, the monsoon might not happen, or it would be very weak. The monsoon is extremely important for India because it brings rain that helps grow crops. It fills rivers and provides water for drinking. It also cools down the extremely hot temperatures in many parts of India. Simple summary. 1. Old idea. Scientists used to think that low pressure and high pressure alone caused the monsoon winds. 2. New idea. Now they know that the Tibet Plateau heating up is very important for starting the monsoon. 3. How it works. Tibet Plateau heats up in summer. The air over the plateau rises, creating a low-pressure zone. This low pressure pulls in moist air from the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea. When this moist air hits the mountains, it cools down and creates rain. Example to make it even simpler. Imagine you are boiling water in a pot. The Tibet Plateau is the pot. The steam, air, rises up because it's hot. The space left in the pot, low pressure, pulls in cold water from a jug, the ocean. When the cold water hits the hot pot land, it turns into steam, rain. That's how the monsoon works. I hope this explanation makes it much clearer and easier to understand. Let's dive deeper into how the Tibet Plateau influences the Indian monsoon, step by step, in the simplest way possible. Hash number 1. What is the Tibet Plateau? The Tibet Plateau is a massive, high area of land located near India and China. It is 600 kilometers wide in the west, 1,000 kilometers wide in the east, and 2,000 kilometers long. Its average height is about 4,000 meters, around 4 kilometers high. This makes it very tall, so tall that it affects how the air moves around it. This plateau is like a giant wall or block in the sky. Number 2. Why does the Tibet Plateau matter? Since the Tibet Plateau is so high, it plays a major role in controlling the weather. It acts as a barrier, blocking air from flowing smoothly, and it also becomes a heat source, warming up the air above it during summer. These two effects are very important in bringing the monsoon rains to India. 3. 2 main ways the Tibet Plateau affects the weather. A. As a mechanical barrier. The Tibet Plateau acts like a giant wall in the atmosphere. Air, especially strong winds in the sky called the jet stream, can't move easily over the plateau, so the winds, the jet stream, must shift around it. During summer, around June, these winds move north of the plateau and disappear from India, which helps bring the monsoon to India. An example. Imagine a strong wind is blowing across a flat field. But if there's a huge mountain in the way, like the Tibet Plateau, the wind can't just go through the mountain. It has to move around it. This is how the jet stream behaves near the plateau. B. As a heat source. During the summer months, the Tibet Plateau heats up a lot. The heat makes the air above it rise. This rising air creates a low-pressure area, which starts to pull in moist air from the Indian Ocean. This moist air causes the monsoon rains to arrive in India. Example. Think of the Tibet Plateau as a big hot stove. When it heats up, the air around it rises like steam, and this rising air pulls other winds toward it. These winds bring rain to India during the monsoon. 4. What happens during June? In June, when the Tibet Plateau becomes hot, the strong winds called the subtropical jet stream move north, leaving India. These winds shift to a position above the Himalayas at about 40 degrees latitude, north of India. As the jet stream moves away, it creates conditions for the summer monsoon to start. The moist air from the Indian Ocean gets pulled into India, bringing heavy rains that are vital for crops and daily life. 5. What happens in October? In October, the process reverses. The jet stream moves back south, closer to India. This starts to push away the monsoon, and the rainy season comes to an end. 6. What did Yin explain? Yin is a scientist who explained that the Tibet Plateau plays a crucial role in moving the jet stream. According to Yin, the Himalayas and the Tibet Plateau act as a giant wall, which forces the winds to shift. Yin believed that the monsoon starts not because of the heating in India, but because of the blocking effect of the Himalayas and the Tibet Plateau. 7. The key role of the Tibet Plateau in the monsoon. The Tibet Plateau is responsible for pushing away the jet stream, allowing the monsoon winds to bring rain to India. It acts like a controller of the winds and the weather, starting and stopping the monsoon each year. 8. Why is this important? The Indian monsoon is critical for agriculture and water supply in India. It brings much-needed rain for growing crops like rice and wheat. Without the monsoon, there could be droughts, periods without enough water, which would harm people and farming. Simplified summary. The Tibet Plateau is a huge and tall area that controls how the winds move. In June, the plateau heats up and forces the jet stream to move north, which helps bring the monsoon rains to India. In October, the jet stream comes back south and the monsoon slowly goes away. The Tibet Plateau acts like a big switch, turning the monsoon on in summer and off in autumn. Final example. Imagine the Tibet Plateau as a giant fan. In summer, the fan pushes the air, jet stream, north and pulls in rainy winds, monsoon, to India. In autumn, the fan slows down and the rainy winds leave. I hope this helps you understand how the Tibet Plateau affects the monsoon. Let me know if you need any more details. Sure. Let's break down the information about the Tibetan Plateau, the summer monsoon, and related concepts even further and in the simplest way possible. 1. Understanding the Tibetan Plateau. What is the Tibetan Plateau? The Tibetan Plateau is a large, flat area of land in Asia. It is really high, about 4,000 meters, or roughly 13,123 feet above sea level. Imagine it as a giant table on top of the mountains. How big is it? It stretches 2,000 kilometers long, about 1,243 miles, and is 600 kilometers wide in the west and 1,000 kilometers wide in the east. That's like a huge flat land that's almost the size of some small countries. Harsher. 2. The plateau as a heat source. What happens to the plateau in summer? In the summer, the sun heats up the plateau a lot because it is high up and gets direct sunlight. The heat from the plateau warms the air above it. What is low pressure? When air gets hot, it rises up. When the hot air rises, it leaves behind a space where there is less air. This is called low pressure. 3. Formation of the anticyclone. What is an anticyclone? An anticyclone is a large area where the air pressure is higher than the surrounding areas. You can think of it as a big balloon of air that pushes down and prevents clouds from forming. Where does the anticyclone form? The warm air rising over the Tibetan Plateau creates this high-pressure area, or anticyclone, in the sky above it. 4. How the tropical easterly jet forms. What is the tropical easterly jet? Below the high-pressure area, the air starts moving from the east to the west. This movement of air is called the tropical easterly jet. Where does it flow? The jet flows far south of Tibet, roughly in line with cities like Kolkata and Bangalore. Example. Imagine a river of air flowing high above the ground, moving from the east to the west, just like water flows in a river. 5. Effect of the jet stream on pressure areas. What happens next? As the easterly jet moves south, it causes the air to descend, go down into the South Indian Ocean. This descent increases the pressure in the ocean, creating a stronger high-pressure area. What is important about this pressure? This high pressure is like a fan blowing air towards lower pressure areas in the north. 6. Creating winds and the summer monsoon. What do these winds do? The winds created by this pressure move towards the low-pressure area in northwestern India. When these winds cross the equator, the middle line of the Earth, they change direction to blow from the southwest. This is called the southwesterly summer monsoon. Why is this important? These southwesterly winds bring moisture, water, from the ocean to land. This is why they can create rain. 7. Understanding pressure gradient. What is a pressure gradient? A pressure gradient is the difference in air pressure between two areas. The greater the difference, the stronger the winds will be. It's like how a steeper hill makes it easier for a ball to roll down. Why does this matter for the monsoon? If there is a big difference in pressure, steep gradient, between the high pressure in the South Indian Ocean and the low pressure over India, the winds will be stronger. Strong winds mean a stronger monsoon, bringing more rain. 8. Importance of the summer monsoon. The summer monsoon is very important for India because it provides the rain that is crucial for growing crops like rice and wheat. It helps fill rivers and reservoirs with water, which people need for drinking, farming, and other uses. Summary of the whole process. 1. Tibetan Plateau equals a large flat area that gets hot in summer. 2. Heating up causes hot air to rise, creating a low-pressure area. 3. Anticyclone. High-pressure area forms above the plateau. 4. Tropical easterly jet. Air flows from east to west below the anticyclone. 5. Winds. Move towards lower pressure areas, creating strong winds. 6. Southwesterly summer monsoon equals winds bring rain to India. Visualize in the Tibetan Plateau as a big oven. The heat from the oven makes hot air rise and creates a balloon, anticyclone, of air above it. This balloon pushes air outwards, the easterly jet, which flows to lower pressure areas, like wind blowing into a room from outside. The winds bring rain when they reach India, which is like watering a garden. If you have any questions or need further clarification on any point, feel free to ask. Sure. Let's break down the concepts of the Tibetan Plateau, the tropical easterly jet, and how they relate to the southwest monsoon in India, using simple words and clear explanations. 1. What is the Tibetan Plateau? Size and location. The Tibetan Plateau is a huge area of land that is very high up. It is about 600 kilometers wide in the west and 1,000 kilometers wide in the east. It stretches 2,000 kilometers long and sits at an average height of 4,000 meters above sea level. It is often called the roof of the world because it is so high. Importance. Because of its size and height, the Tibetan Plateau plays a big role in how air moves in the atmosphere, especially in the summer. 2. What happens during summer on the Tibetan Plateau? Heating. In the summer, the sun shines brightly on the Tibetan Plateau, making the air above it very warm. Warm air rises because it is lighter than cold air, so the warm air starts to go up into the sky. 3. What is the tropical easterly jet? Formation. As the air rises from the Tibetan Plateau, it creates a jet stream high in the atmosphere called the tropical easterly jet. This jet stream starts east of India and moves westward over India and the Arabian Sea. Function. The tropical easterly jet helps to push air down towards northern India. It creates a flow of air that can influence weather patterns. 4. The role of the jet stream in weather. Weakening of the jet stream. When the Tibetan Plateau gets very hot in summer, it can weaken another jet stream called the western subtropical jet. The western jet normally helps to keep weather patterns stable. When it weakens, it can lead to changes in wind and pressure over northern India. 5. Pressure gradient and wind flow. What is a pressure gradient? The pressure gradient is the difference in air pressure between two places. High pressure means the air is pushing down hard, while low pressure means it's lighter. When the Tibetan Plateau heats up, the pressure changes, creating areas of low pressure and high pressure. Wind movement. Air always moves from high pressure to low pressure. So, as the Tibetan Plateau heats up and causes low pressure, the wind starts to blow toward it from the higher pressure areas. Number 6. The Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ. What is the ITCZ? The Intertropical Convergence Zone is a place near the equator where trade winds from the north and south meet. It's like a meeting point for winds. In summer, this zone moves northward and can reach northern India. 7. How does this all come together for the southwest monsoon? Warm, moist air. As the air from the south, from the oceans, moves north towards the ITCZ, it carries warm and moist air. This air is essential for bringing rain. Southwest monsoon. This flow of warm, moist air from the south creates the southwest monsoon, which is a seasonal rain that falls over India. It brings heavy rainfall that is crucial for farming and water supply in the region. 8. Summary of the process. Heating of the Tibetan Plateau. The sun heats the Tibetan Plateau in summer, causing the air to rise. Formation of the tropical easterly jet. The rising air creates the tropical easterly jet, which moves air toward northern India. Pressure changes. Heating also weakens the western subtropical jet, changing air pressure patterns. Meeting of winds easy, the ITCZ moves north, bringing warm, moist air towards India. Rainfall from the southwest monsoon. This flow of air leads to the southwest monsoon, which brings rain. 9. Example to visualize the process. Imagine cooking water. Think of a pot of water on the stove. When you heat the pot, the water inside gets hot and starts to make steam rise. If you have a lid that's not tightly closed, like the weakened jet stream, the steam, which represents warm air, escapes easily and fills the kitchen, creating weather changes. Conclusion. The Tibetan Plateau plays a crucial role in creating the southwest monsoon by heating up and affecting air movements. This process is important for bringing rain to India, which is vital for agriculture and water resources. If you have more questions or need clarification on any part, feel free to ask. Let's break down these concepts about what happens in October regarding the Tibetan Plateau, jet streams, and the monsoon in India. We'll keep it simple and easy to understand, step by step. 1. What happens in October? Change of conditions. In October, things change from summer. The weather patterns over the Tibetan Plateau and northern India become different. Disintegration of anticyclone. Remember the anticyclone, a high-pressure area, that formed over the Tibetan Plateau during summer? In October, this anticyclone breaks down or disintegrates. This means it weakens and doesn't stay strong anymore. 2. Tropical easterly jet stream disappears. What is the tropical easterly jet stream? Earlier, the tropical easterly jet stream helped bring warm and moist air to northern India during the summer monsoon. It was like a highway for the air. Disappearance. In October, this tropical easterly jet stream no longer exists. This means there's no more warm, moist air being pushed towards India. 3. Westerly jet stream returns. What is the subtropical westerly jet stream? The subtropical westerly jet stream is another jet stream that moves from west to east. Think of it as a different highway in the sky, but this one is colder. Reestablishment. In October, the subtropical westerly jet stream comes back and moves over northern India. 4. Impact on the monsoon. Retreat of the summer monsoon. Because the tropical easterly jet stream is gone and the westerly jet stream returns, the summer monsoon retreats southward. This means the rain that was falling in northern India starts to move away, and it doesn't rain as much. 5. Different views on the monsoon onset. Koteswaram's view. According to Koteswaram, the strong anticyclone over the Tibetan Plateau is connected to the start of the summer monsoon. He believes that when the anticyclone is strong, it helps the monsoon begin. Frost's view. On the other hand, R. Frost disagrees with Koteswaram. He thinks that what really causes the monsoon to start is something different. Intense heating. The sun heats the air very strongly below a certain height, below the 200 milliband level. Cooling above. At the same time, the air higher up, above 200 millibs, cools down. Frost believes that the changes in temperature, heating and cooling, cause the monsoon to start before the changes in the jet streams happen. Number 6. Summary of key points. In October, the weather patterns change. The high-pressure area, anticyclone, over the Tibetan Plateau weakens. The tropical easterly jet stream disappears, which stops the flow of warm, moist air to northern India. The subtropical westerly jet stream comes back, leading to less rain and the retreat of the summer monsoon southward. There are two main ideas about what causes the summer monsoon to start. Koteswaram thinks it's related to the strong anticyclone. Frost believes it's about the heating of the air below and cooling of the air above. 7. Example to help understand. Imagine a balloon. Think of the Tibetan Plateau like a balloon that gets heated by the sun in summer. When the balloon gets hot, it expands, like the air rising, and helps push air outwards. In October, when the balloon cools down, it shrinks. The anticyclone weakens, and air doesn't flow out as much. This change causes less rain, just like a balloon that stops pushing air out. Conclusion. In October, the Tibetan Plateau's weather patterns change significantly, leading to the end of the summer monsoon and the return of different wind patterns. Different scientists have different ideas about why the monsoon starts, focusing on temperature changes in the air. If you have any questions or need further clarification, feel free to ask.